Yay! John Two Hawks is here with us today on Wisdom Keepers of Earth. And if you don't know about John, I have a bio here. Grammy-nominated recording artist, author, speaker, John Two Hawks has spoken and performed at events of all kinds and venues around the world for decades. John Two Hawks' music has earned him Grammy and Emmy nominations, Platinum Awards, been featured in movies by Fox Searchlight, films by HBO, and programs by A&E and the History Channel. John Two Hawks' signature brand of music is known and loved by millions. I'm included in that. Around the world, a mixed blood person, I'm going to say, of Lakota, and that would be Lakota Ogalala, right? Did I say that right?
You got close. So Oglala Lakota.
Ogalala Lakota and Irish descent. John has performed his award-winning music for audiences as large as 12,000. He has also shared the keynote podium with U.S. presidents, senators, Hollywood celebrities, and other notables. Through John's creative endeavors, he has reached into a hurting world, sharing the healing power of love, compassion, and humility, and offering holistic approaches to achieving physical, emotional, and spiritual health and wellness, and living a balanced life of purpose and passion. And I would say he does that through his amazing music, which we all adore. Love your music, John. Love, love, love it.
Thank you.
Musically speaking, I just wanted to ask you, I know you play over 20 instruments, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot. I lost track of the number.
But the one you're
Yeah.
most known for is the cedar flute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The needle flute is the one that for whatever reason, it's where I landed. I started off as a singer. I was a singer for bands, and I was in rock bands. People are surprised when I tell them I was in metal bands. I did singer-songwriter folk music with a guitar, and did that for a while. Cut an album actually in that style way back in the day. And I always tell people I didn't go looking for the flute. The flute came later. It really came looking for me. I ended up, this group asked me to come and do living history programs for kids. And I said, well, let me have a look. And I ended up doing that with them. And I was at a powwow, and I had been doing this living history program for some time. And I walked past this table, and they had on this table were these very inexpensive native flutes. And I just was drawn to them. And I just thought, well, that could be a nice addition to my program, So I picked one up, I bought it, and I started playing it for these programs, and it just sort of snowballed. People started saying afterward, do you have that on tape? And so I just, I just kept playing. I just thought it was just a part of my program. I never really saw it as being a vehicle, that would carry me into a different way of music that I never thought about. I had heard native flute, and stuff, but I never really thought of myself as, being interested in it or anything. But as soon as I picked it up, I could play it. It was like I never had to have anybody show me how. I just sort of knew. It was innate. And I understood the instrument instantly. And so it really, of all the instruments I play, it was the one that came absolutely the easiest to me. And so it just sort of happened to me. I didn't go looking for it. It just sort of ended up that way,
That's
but I'm glad I did.
Yeah, that's a very organic way. And I know you had sort of a rough childhood, to say the least. Do you think that music was a way for you to heal yourself or unleash some creativity or What do you think?
Sitting where I am now, I have answers to that. But when I was first beginning with the flute, and when I was first, when I first when somebody first said to me, well, you need to make, it was Peggy that said to me, you need to make an album of this music with the flute. She was the first one that had the idea. I was like, what? I mean, I was totally bewildered.
I'm doing heavy metal. What do you mean, Indian flute?
Yeah, I'm like, what? I'm going to play the flute? I mean, it just seemed so out there for me, And so when I started doing that, I started playing, I started going around and playing. There was something came out of it that as I was doing it, I began to realize that this instrument is more than just sound. It's more than just a musical tool, if you will. I realized that there's more to this thing. People are coming to me after a performance or a show with tears in their eyes, and they're telling me how the music got into them and did things to them and helped them through something. And the more that happened, the more I realized, wow, this instrument's not just about making a song. It's about there's some healing something going on here with this thing. And so I sort of gradually kind of opened myself up to that kind of way with the flute. And I think over time, as things progressed, and then I ended up writing the book Hidden Medicine in 2016, and which is about my horrible abusive childhood. And that was the first time I think I really sort of it sort of opened up in my spirit, in my mind, that, oh wow, wait a minute, this music has been sort of healing me all along. Like the flute sort of was this vehicle, this sort of healing messenger in a way that sort of found its way into my life. And then as much as I was offering songs to people, those songs were really coming around full circle, and they were coming back to me. And so it ended up being this like really incredible tool that, and tool is really the wrong word. It became literally an instrument of healing, and it was healing me as I was offering songs for people, and they were finding their own kind of, healing experiences with it. Holy cow, it was healing me, and I didn't even realize it until I got ready to do Hidden Medicine. And what happened with Hidden Medicine was the weirdest thing I've ever had happen in the studio. I've cut 31 albums to date. And I was in the studio on Hidden Medicine, and that was back in 2016. So that's a few albums back. It was the first time in my music career that I went in the studio and I heard music, but I had no clue what it was about. I was completely unplugged and detached from. Normally I go in, there's a concept. I know what I'm making the music about. I have an idea. I went in the studio for that music. I could hear it. It was coming to me. No clue. I had not a clue what the music was about. And then I composed the song, Love Will Find You. And that song, it was actually, that song was only the second time, I believe, that I ever played. I'm going to show this flute. I ever played this flute. It's one of my favorite flutes. I call it the branch. It's made out of a single branch. It's handmade. I love this instrument. It's got a fantastic sound. So it was only the second time it had ever been played on an album. And I loved it the first time. And so I thought, I'm going to compose another song with that flute, and I could hear it already. When I got done with it, I sat in my studio, and something happened to me that night that has never happened to me before or since. I sat and listened to that composition, that recording, and I cried. Oh. I just literally something in me cracked open, and I just started crying. And I was like, what in the world is happening right now? I couldn't put my head around it. But it was after hearing that and after having that emotional kind of response to it that all of a sudden it hit me. It just hit me like boom. And I realized this music is about my childhood. That's what it's about. It's about surviving, healing, and rising from trauma. That's what it's about. And I knew it when the song Love Will Find You kind of was born. And so that song, Love Will Find You, kind of found me. It showed me the way into what the music was supposed to be about. So then the music came into being, and then that gave birth to the book that followed it. So it was all part of that whole process. But so yeah, the flute, in a weird kind of slow and gradual roundabout way, really did help me to heal a lot of trauma. I never realized when I sat down to write that book, I thought I was done with it. I thought I'm past this. I have worked through all of it. I'm good. There's no more. All of that's out of me. Boy, was I wrong. When I sat down to write that book, I have never in my life cried so hard. I have never cried so hard as when I wrote that book. I mean, it was the kind of crying that gets down into your belly, that guttural, just almost like a guttural, moan. It's deep, deep, deep pain, just kind of just rushing up and pouring out of you, And wow, that totally was unexpected. And it was all because of the flute. All of it would not have happened were it not for the flute. So the flute really did lead me there. I didn't know where it was leading me. Like I said, I didn't know it was going to find me, but there it was.
You had the courage to follow it. You see, you also had to participate on some level of your consciousness. You knew that was the direction to take. And that portion came easily so you could deal with the hard stuff. Maybe
Great.
Later.
Yeah, that makes sense. It really does. Yeah.
You're amazing. I'm in awe and so honored that you're speaking with us today.
I'm honored to be here.
Oh,
Linda.
Yeah. Before we, I know that growing up sort of mixed, Irish, Ogallala, Lakota, must have had its own share of issues, not being fully in one foot or the other. Now, we seem to be embracing that diversity a little bit more. But when you and I were growing up, probably that embracing wasn't always there. So did you feel like you weren't embraced by your Irish, or did you know them, or you were struggling with who you were as an American Indian?
Yeah. When I was a kid growing up, when you're a kid, you're just a kid. You just want to play with toys and, and you're not thinking about identity, really that much. It's especially true when you grow up with mixed ancestry, because, one person in your family might feel one way about it, another might feel another. And there's really no kind of, it's different than growing up exclusively in one culture. It's because when you're in exclusively one culture, it's around you all times. You sort of grow up immersed in it. So when you grow up as a mixed person with, kind of sort of pieces and parts, if you will, of various cultures, you only get a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one, and you get a taste, and you don't really know whether to settle into one or the other, or none at all. You don't really know. But I do remember when I was a kid, I remember my mother, who was beautiful and had long, beautiful, straight, dark hair. And she was my first crush. She was 5 feet tall and 100 pounds dripping wet. And I used to follow her around like a shadow. And I was the firstborn. And so, I got to have time with her. I got to have 2 years with her before the next kid came along and, stole my, stole the space from me.
Well, as a
But
father, I'm sure you can identify with children like that. Yeah.
so my mom was the first one to say, oh, well, we're Indian. She was the first one to mention it to me, to say, oh, well, we're Lakota. And there wasn't a lot of talk about it. It wasn't like, oh, we have these great conversations. There wasn't really that much, but she would mention it. And it kind of got stuck in my head. And like, wow, okay. So I would remember that, and then my mother would take me for these walks. She'd find morel mushrooms. She was the best morel mushroom finder I ever knew. She could, I swear she could smell them. We would go into any forest anywhere. If there were morels out there, she'd find them. She was just amazing that way. She taught me about mushrooms. She said, look at this mushroom. And she showed me it. And then she showed me another one that to me looked identical. And she explained to me that, no, that one will kill you. It's poisonous. And she showed me the little differences. And I was like, I remember being blown away, like, wow, So my mom had this like real interesting connection to the earth, and was like, she would stop along the side of the road and cut wild asparagus and bring it home and cook it. And I mean, that kind of thing. And so I grew up with her kind of introducing me to a relationship with the earth, kind of hinting around in her own way about our indigenous background. And then, the Irish comes from my dad's side. And my dad also has indigenous background. My dad actually has, and he was very proud of it. We don't know much about it, but he was very proud to have Potawatomi background. And so he talked about that. He wore a hat, it said Potawatomi right on it, but my dad never went to a powwow in his life. He never did anything that would be, considered, a native kind of cultural thing. He never did. He went to work, 5-6 days a week and at the factory, and he drank too much, and and so I had these hints around me. And then we moved. Then things happened. My mom and dad got divorced. I ended up living with my dad and the woman who would ultimately be my abuser for a decade, and his new wife. And to get away from her, I found out my grandfather, my mom's dad. I found out that he lived just a few miles away. And so I would ride my bike over there to get away from the darkness and terror of the house I was living in and escape. And so I didn't think anything about it. He was just my grandpa. But then one day, all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, he starts telling me stories. And I start hearing about, whoa, what? And he's telling me about how, he's just giving me lessons of wisdom, all kinds of lessons, and he was always funny because I'd always have to prime the pump, come on, Grandpa, tell me something, and finally he'd go, well, all right. And he'd light up his pipe, and, he'd either sit in his chair or we'd go out of the house and go walking. And then he'd tell me a story. And so it was just those things, just those little hints that I grabbed onto, and I held on hard, because when you're going through horrible, traumatic things as a child, boy, you just need something to hang on to, And I remember feeling so kind of having a sense of like, wow, okay, I have this identity of these people who have been traumatized, and they've been hurt, and they've been stolen from, and all these bad things. And that was exactly what I was feeling in my personal life. And I thought, wow, I identified with that. And it felt like home. And so I had that identity, and I was going through, I have a memory bag. I was a weird kid. And so I kept this bag, and everything that I thought might be a memory, I would stick it in there. And so I still have it. It's in the closet in my recording studio. It's still there. And there's all these things I threw in there from the time I was, 8 or 9 years old. Well, one of the things I stuck in there was this writing that I did when I was in like fourth grade. And the writing is me in fourth grade talking about what it feels like to be a native kid in a classroom and be completely invisible, be completely like nobody knows, to be a native kid and nobody recognizes that you are. And I wrote about that in fourth grade. I still have the paper. So the whole journey of identity with me has been very, very slow and gradual. And I have never tried to get the cart ahead of the horse. I never went chasing after anything. I just accepted what came, thought, oh, that's cool, and took in what I felt right to me, and what I learned and what I heard from my grandfather, oral history, the things I learned. And I took that, what little bit there was, and then as I got older, I just paid attention, kept my mouth shut, I went back to South Dakota, as a young man, and I walked around in South Dakota on the reservation like a ghost. Nobody knew who I was, but I sure felt home there. It's really wild to feel so at home and feel at the same time so disconnected,
So
So, yeah,
that's a wow. Yes. That's quite a journey for you growing up. So my next question is that in seeking to, identify and be seen and participate in, I remember you telling me you went for your very first memorial ride.
Mm,
And how painful it was, and how you were the last person in, but there was always someone waiting for you to help you
yeah,
and escort you back. Can you tell us a little bit about your first ride and when you did it?
yeah,
What year was that? Because I see you've done a few.
yeah. So the first thing I need to do before I say anything about it is to give thanks to Percy Whiteplume. Percy Whiteplume is the whole reason that I had the esteemed privilege to be able to even participate in the ride.
And
It would
that's
not have happened without him.
and that's
And
the
so
Chief Bigfoot Memorial Ride.
the Chief Bigfoot Memorial Ride.
Okay.
Yep. So he was the one that kindly extended the invite to me. And it was there was a series of things that happened to facilitate that. But the long and short of the story is that they needed some help. I pushed some stuff out on Facebook when I heard that they needed some help. The help came unbelievably. I don't know who did it, but as a thank you, Percy reached out and said, "Hey, man, I have a horse for you if you want to take part in the Chief Bigfoot Memorial Ride." There's no way I could say no to that. I mean, it was like I said, I was a ghost. I had gone up there many times and never found anyone to connect to, really. And here was Percy Whiteplume reaching out to me and inviting me to come and take part in something so incredibly ceremonial and sacrificial and important to Lakota people. And of course, I said yes, even though I've barely ridden a horse throughout my entire life. I mean, my grandpa put me on a horse when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I did a couple howdy doody trail rides, and that was it. And I had never really been on a horse other than that. And so I let Percy know that. I said, I really need a horse that's going to be really nice, And he hooked me up, man. He put me on the most beautiful, most gentle, strong horse of all. And So I went in 2013 and I rode the whole way.
It's a
I went
it's a
from
300-mile ride, correct? Or 200?
actually, no, it's 200 miles for those who go from Standing Rock. And then the Oglala contingent that kind of meets at Bridger in South Dakota, they go the rest of the way. So it ends up being for me, it was about 100 and maybe 130 miles,
In
something
the
like that.
winter.
Oh yeah, in the dead of South Dakota winter.
We need to give a little backstory about.
Yes. Yes. So what the Chief Bigfoot Memorial Ride is doing, it is following as best as it can the path that Chief Bigfoot and his people took in 1890 after Sitting Bull was murdered. Chief Bigfoot and around 500 or so people left what is now called Standing Rock Reservation in the northern part of South Dakota and made a beeline for what was then Red Cloud Agency, now called Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So they were trying to get to Red Cloud Agency because they felt they'd be safe with Red Cloud because he had this relationship with the U.S. government. And so the journey they took was brutal. It was, blizzard conditions. We're talking, around Christmas time. We're talking, from December 21st or something like that, all the way till December 29th. And so they were intercepted by the 7th Cavalry on the 28th. They were taken down to this lowland area, and around that area is a gulch where a creek runs, and it's called Wounded Knee Creek. And it's been called that forever. And so that's where they set up camp. And as the history goes, on the morning of the 29th, they massacred, according to Virgil Killstrait, he told me the number's 420 people. That's how many people died. And it was children, elders, women, men, indiscriminate. So we ride to remember them, and so that they are not forgotten, and so that what happened is not forgotten. And we make that sacrificial journey to honor them. And trust me, it's a sacrifice. It hurts. And especially for somebody who's barely ridden a horse, it hurts. Let me tell you, I can tell you from experience. I'll never forget when I would come in, after a day, we'd be, because some days, the longest day was 26 miles. That's a long way to go on a horse in the dead of South Dakota winter when it's 20 below zero and the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour. Let me tell you, it was something else. And so, but when I would ride in, there would be Percy. He'd be standing on the fence row, and he'd be like, "Hey, John, you made it, brother," and he's always so encouraging, and he's a true brother in every sense of the word. And so without him, it wouldn't have happened. So I have to give him all the credit and all the thanks for making that possible for me. So I rode in 2013, and when I finished that ride, I knew on day one, when I rode the first long distance, which is that 26-mile stretch, I rode into the night. Actually, one of the songs on the album Horse Spirit is called Into the Night, and it's about that. And I rode long into the night, and it was, oh my goodness, the cold was unreal. And that was the night that I knew that this one experience, this one time, would be the last time I would do this ride on the back of a horse. I knew there was no way this was going to happen again. And so I wanted to make sure that I went the distance. And so, I ended up going the distance, which was kind of miraculous almost, and it was not without a lot of help. I had a brother with me, David Burnett, who is a Chichangu Lakota from Rosebud. And without him, there's no way I could have done the ride. So thank goodness he came with me on the ride, he and his wife. And so she was a support. She drove the car around and met us in various places. And David, he kept track of me on the ride and watched over me, basically. And so without help, I don't think I could have done it. But boy, and without CH, the horse that I sat on, no way I could have made it. So he was so great to me on the ride. And, so after that, what I've done since then is I will go and I will help. I will just help in whatever way they need help. If Percy needs somebody to put up corrals, I'll be there for that. If somebody needs help with a saddle, I'll help with that. If somebody needs help carrying a staff, I'll help with that. Whatever they need, I'm just there just to help out. So that's what I do now.
And it's a very wonderful way for the community to memorialize this Chief Bigfoot, but it's also a way where you give to each other, because someone needs to feed the horses and someone needs to feed the people that come in. And I know that everyone gets together in this community hall and takes care of one another, and it just sounds
it's really something
special.
It's such a community effort, and it's a lot. Let me tell you, the you know, it's a lot. There's just a lot of moving parts. There's, you know, every truck that hauls a horse needs to have gas in it. Yeah. You know, all the horses, they need feed. They've got to eat. So there's, you know, getting that. You know, there's some beautiful people that have come to know the ride and come to know what's going on, who donate, who will help out with feed and help out with gas money and help out with that, because, you know, without that help, it would be almost impossible. But yes, man, the help comes in every year since 1986. And so, I mean, it's just been amazing. And the community I love the fact that, you know, you come in from a day and there's food waiting for you, you know, at the, you know, whether it's the community center or one of the gyms or whatever, there'll be food. And halfway through the day, some days there'll be lunch. So you'll stop and there'll be people have made, you know, and it's amazing to see the grandmothers and the little children and the aunties and, you know, and the elders, everybody getting involved and everybody kind of chipping in and helping out and making it possible. And at the core of it, everybody knows what they're doing there. Everybody knows what it's about. You know, most everybody knows that you're there to make a sacrifice and you're there to remember what happened here. Why you're making this ride on a horse is because somebody else made this in 1890 and maybe did not make it out of Wounded Knee Creek, you know.
It's a very humbling experience, right?
It is.
Very humbling.
It's incredibly humbling. I don't think anything has humbled me more. And also, weirdly, helped me to overcome fear. You know, one of the things I think that was left over, well, first of all, I told you I was a weird boy. I was just a weird kid. I was just not a typical boy. I was always this crazy sensitive, and I would sit on the porch and watch birds for 3 hours. And I was just odd and different, and I'd never fit in, and I got bullied and beat up, and then I was abused and all this horrible stuff. And so I really developed a really unhealthy fear, and it stayed with me, you know, all my life. And the Bigfoot ride really, really did something for that. It really helped heal a lot of that in me. Because there are moments on the ride when you have to face down your fears. You just have to, you know. And I remember being afraid several times on the ride. And wow, you come out the other side and you're like, wow, I'm okay. Wow, I did it. I didn't think I could do that, you know. And then you find out, wow, I did that, you know. And it over and over and over, those things happen. And so by the time you get to the end, you've really faced down a lot of fear, you know, at least I did anyway. And it really helped me to fix some of that in myself, which is incredible. That's the thing about the ride. That's what it does. It just heals people. There's so much healing that goes on that ride.
And it prepares you for your next level of healing, which you did with your medicine.
Yeah.
You know, hidden medicine book and music. So little by little, these things were showing you the way, and you never said no. You said yes. And that's what I want the audience to know is when there's an opportunity to say yes, please say yes to those whisperings and the urgings and the kindnesses that are coming your way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very important to not allow fear to steer.
Yeah.
One
Right.
of my little
Right.
one of my little quotes, don't allow fear to steer, because if you allow fear to steer, the fear is going to steer you to the side of the road and stop.
Yeah.
You're never going anywhere. If fear steers, you're done. You're not moving anywhere. So I could have listened to the voice in my head that said, are you out of your mind? You're going to get on a horse for 130 miles? What about that isn't stupid? You know, I mean, seriously. I mean, I don't know how to ride a horse at all. And everybody on the ride knew I was terrible. I mean, I'm holding on to the saddle horn like it's life itself. And one of the more experienced riders comes riding up to me and he goes, you know what that saddle horn is, don't you? And I said, what's that? He goes, that's the eject button. I'm like, well, I'm still holding on to it and I haven't fallen off yet. So, but I just
That's
wasn't a good
humor.
writer. And
That's
they knew.
Yeah, that's bringing humor, which is also very healing to things.
It is.
And
Yeah.
I just want to mention one thing. I think a story you had mentioned to me was, I don't know if it was at the end of the ride or sometime during the middle of the ride, where an elder, a very respected elder, called you over and you came over and he said, I hear you play a little flute. And you said, yeah, a little bit. And he said, play
Yeah.
for the group. And here you are doing this ride, you're exhausted, and you're also lending an uplifting hand to everyone by playing your music. I thought that was really lovely. I hear you play a little flute. Very, very low
Yeah.
key, very humbling, very level.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, that man is the man that I refer to as my brother. His name is Chubbs Thunderhawk. And his family has taken me in and as really as one of their own. And they have been so kind to me and so loving and so accepting of me. And I mean, I just can't thank them enough. Chubbs was, everybody that knew Chubbs knew that Chubbs was a beautiful, spiritual, wise, you know, fun guy. He was accepting of people, and he wasn't full of judgment. You know, he was kind. He made me feel really, really accepted. And you know, that was the first time I interacted with him was after we had ridden into Kyle. And that night when he just, you know, he came to me and asked me to play the flute. He asked me if I had one. Do you have a flute with you? And I brought one. I had stuck one in the car. And I thought, what the heck? I'll bring a flute. It'll just be in the car. If nobody ever says anything, I'm not saying anything. It's just going to stay in the car. But here came Chubbs. And somebody must have whispered in his ear that I played the flute. I don't know who did, but he knew. And so he came over and asked me if I played, and I told him, yeah, a bit, you know, and then he said, well, go get it. I want you to play for everyone. And going back to that very first visit or two or three to the reservation, when I went, just because I wanted to go home, I wanted to touch my feet on the ground and connect. And yet I felt completely disconnected. As much as I felt at home on the land, I felt completely disconnected to the community. And that was understandable. I didn't grow up there.
Right.
You know, so it was, so the being invited back, taking part in the ride, riding next to, you know, all these other Lakota people, and then to have Chubbs ask me to play for everyone. And it wasn't like everyone was sitting there like, oh, he's playing the flute. Barely anybody cared. You know, they were eating hot dogs and talking to each other. They were barely listening. But there were a few that were listening, and I didn't care. It didn't matter. What mattered to me was that I had been asked. Chubbs asked me, and that was the greatest request I ever got. And then every night after that, he would come over to me and he would say, "You will play the flute tonight." He didn't ask me anymore after that. He told me, "You will play the flute tonight." So I got to tell you a little side story about Chubbs.
Okay.
I was in Ireland. I got a message from Chubbs, and he asked me, he said, "Where do you live?" He said, he knew that I was in Arkansas somewhere. And he said, "My daughter is recently moved to Arkansas." And he said, I don't know where you live. He said, "But if you're anywhere near her, I want you to take her under your wing. I want you to help her and be there for her." And, you know, and so he said, "She's living in a town called Eureka Springs." I almost fell off my chair. So his daughter moved to the town I live in. And I ended up taking care of her, making sure that she had supplies. We went to a food kitchen and got her a bunch of stuff. And so she's my niece. And we have, so she is like, has a spot right here in my heart. And so Chubbs gave me that gift too. He gave me that gift. And it's arguably the most special gift of all. Family.
Well, there's no coincidences. Everything comes together, in that wonderful morphogenic field that we all participate in. I want to get to your music because I heard a cut of Mist and Stone album. And it's called A Hawk on a Cliff. And I tell you, that is probably one of my favorite pieces. And you're playing that branch flute. It's the first time I've ever seen you playing that branch. I'm sure you're playing that branch flute. It's a YouTube video.
Yeah.
And I thought, first of all, look at that crazy flute, boy. It's amazing. You held it up earlier.
That's the one I just showed you.
Oh, that's something. And
that's it.
And the of Mist and Stone album is just beautiful. And this sort of segues into your Irish melding background with your American Indian background. So tell me more about that. Even though this is it felt to me like a very American Indian song.
Right.
But I know I am Irish. My ancestors are Irish. So there was this little bit of, what do I hear? So please tell us more about this album of Mist and Stone.
Absolutely. What happened was I started going to Ireland, right? And I knew that I had, Irish background. I heard about it from my grandmother, who was Irish. And my family, Irish lines are the Maguires and the O'Farrells. And there's even some Kelly blood. So I have a bunch of it. And so I went to Ireland the very first time a long time ago. And we went to visit Newgrange. And we went to visit a couple of other sacred places on the island. And I was absolutely floored when I saw the stone carvings that were 5,300 years old. And saw them and said, "I've seen the same carvings in Colorado. What the heck? That's weird." And so I started to notice that. And then I also met a really dear friend of mine from Ireland. He's a Dubliner. He lives in Wicklow Town, on the east of Ireland. He's a Celtic Catholic monk. His name is, yeah, his name is Brother Seamus Byrne. And we did an album together back in 2002 called Traditions. And so here we were, way back then, there was this tie. And then I went to Ireland, and then I started seeing this stuff. And so I went back and forth to Ireland many times, and I saw more and more and more. And as I interacted and kind of gave voice, if you will, to the Irish in me, I started to realize, wow, there's a tie here. The Irish talk about the earth as mother, and they think about things in circular ways. There's this, the Triskelion infinity wheel that's got the 3 spirals on it, and you see those all over in carvings on stone. Then they have these ancient stone circles that are made of stone all over the island. Then you have the fairy raths and the holy wells where where the druids would take people for various ceremonial things. And so I started to notice, wow, there's something to this. So pandemic hit, we're all stuck at home, and I thought, now's the time. I'm going to write a book about this stuff. Let's see if there's anything more to it. So I started digging, and I was lucky enough to get books from Lady Wilde. Oscar Wilde's mother wrote a book about ancient Irish superstitions and cures and medicines, and it was incredible. And so I gathered together all this material, and it just seemed like every time I turned the page, Melinda, there was another moment. And I just thought, this is incredible. So that's what birthed the book of Mist and Stone. So I wrote the book first.
Oh.
And so, yeah, the book came before the music. So then the whole idea behind the book is to illuminate, shed light on this weird and interesting connection between the ancient Celtic world and the ancient indigenous world of the Americas. And there are so many commonalities that it absolutely will blow your mind. It's one after another, after another, after another. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you one quick example. We tie prayer ties, right? We tie prayer ties on trees in sacred places. And for example, for those that don't know, it looked like this. So you see that red ball there, that's a prayer tie. And so we tie those onto trees and bushes and fences and wherever there's a place that we feel needs to have a prayer left. And so then I'm reading about the Druids, and I'm reading about how they do ceremony and where they end up. And I find out the Druids take people to the holy wells for ceremony, and they tie red prayer ties on the fairy trees. It blew my mind. I just thought, you got to be kidding me. Down to that tiny little prayer tie, there are these connections. And the connections abound from the smallest little things all the way up to the very large things, the very large concepts about circularness and being loose and free and laughter and having a good time, and how humor is the WD-40 of healing.
Yeah.
And so the Irish are a lot like indigenous people. And I can say that from experience. I've been both places, and I tell you, there's so much commonality between the two peoples. And so it's no accident that all these Irish people that came over to the Americas, so many of them found their way into indigenous relationships and ended up having babies with them. And so you have all these people now that are walking around like me that have Irish and Native background. I see it all the time. And so that's kind of how the book came to be. And it kind of birthed it out of that. And it was so exciting for me to honor that kind of branch, if you will, of the root, that kind of grew out of the ground and birthed little old me, And to be able to honor that root and to say, hey, look, this is part of me too. And, and to honor that, because, those ancestors of mine, they came over during the potato famine. They didn't want to leave Ireland. They were forced to leave. And so in a way, one of the things I say in the book at the opening, I have it here. This part right here, I just say this right here, and I love this. It says, for John McGuire and Anne O'Farrell, what you lost in leaving, I have found in returning. Mm-hmm. So it's a circle.
Show us the cover. Show us your book. Oh, yeah. That's lovely. It is a circle. Yeah.
It is. It absolutely is. I would tell you some little secret. You see those stones on the front and back?
Yes.
I took that picture.
Nice.
I took that picture on the west of Ireland. Yeah. So that's not too far from where the McGuires in my family came from. So nice. Yeah, it's very cool. So yeah. So anyway, that's how Mist and Stone, the book anyway, came to be. And then the CD was born out of that. So
and
do you want to talk about the CD?
And does your friend the monk play music, or is did he help you write the? What is he?
He's a musician. He plays the Celtic flute.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, the second song on this album of Mist and Stone by the same name, the second song is called "A Wave of the Ocean." That's him.
Oh.
That's his Irish flute that you hear playing. Oh. So he's on this album too.
Now I'm looking forward to digging in a little deeper now.
Yeah.
So you've got so much information to share. I love the comparisons of the culture between the Irish and the American Indian. It's, of course, what can you say? Of course, it's almost like, yes.
Right. It is, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I kind of got to that place too, Melinda, when I was doing the research. I was like, yeah, we're almost to the point of duh. Really?
And the red prayer ribbons.
Yeah, the prayer ties.
So I had the great good fortune to be invited to your home years ago. And one of the you invited me to participate in that ceremony in picking a direction to tie my ribbon. And I remember that it was very special. Yep. And I also remember you putting up your story TP for me, which was such an honor, really, because I know that's a personal thing, your story on your own TP. And that was just wonderful. I wanted to talk a little bit about your speaking engagements at the Museum of Native American History in Bentonville. I know you were giving lectures once a month for a while. I don't know if you've been doing that or if you're
not lately, not in some time.
Okay. Good. And so I wanted to ask you a question about in your music, has anything ever really kind of funny happened? Like you went to go record something, or you were playing something, or you were with someone and something just sort of happened that was unusual and you just went, oh, okay, we'll just go with that. And any stories come to mind where maybe you went somewhere and you didn't have your flute and you had to use something else, or someone showed up, or, is there a moment where, you were like,
Yeah. There is a lot of those moments in the studio. Like it's not really a comical story or anything funny, but yeah. But there are plenty of things where you mess up. Like sometimes we'll be trying to get a part down, on the guitar, and it'll just be one of those deals when something happens to a recording artist when the record button gets hit. There's just panic that sets in. It's the weirdest thing. You could be on the stage performing. It's no big deal. Oh my gosh, you hit a record button and everything falls apart. And so that happens a lot. We'll be in the studio working on something. It'll just be like, and it'll be like, oh, do it again. do it again, do it again, and over and over and over and over and over and over. That kind of stuff is pretty common. But as far as like the composition process, one of the things that for me happens is I hear things. And so when I did the music, that I asked Percy if it was okay if I put this music for Horse Spirit. I asked him after something had happened. I started hearing this piano part, and I knew that it was about the ride. I knew it was right after I had come home from it. I was still, processing all of it. And all of a sudden I started hearing this piano part, just this boom, boom. And I just kept hearing this progression in my head over and over and over. And I thought, okay, I know what it's about. I don't really want to go in the studio and make an album about this experience. I don't want to do that. This experience was so private and so personal and so, sacred. I just didn't feel right about it. But I thought, I'll go to the studio, I'll record this so I can get it out of my brain, get it out of my head, and have it recorded, and then that'll be the end of it. Yeah, right. So I go in and I record that, and then it's just like the next thing steps up. Okay, now me. So now I have this new thing, and it just started going, and it just kept coming. So I just kept recording, and it was about halfway through the process I realized this music is about the ride. And so, I mean, I knew it was about the ride, but I mean, I had to kind of come to realization, I'm making an album here. So I got a hold of Percy, and I asked him, I said, hey, listen, here's what's happening. I'm going to make this music. And if you tell me no, if you say, no, I don't want you to make an album out of it, I will respect that. And it will just be made for posterity. It'll just be in my studio. No one will ever hear it except for friends and family. And that's it. I'll never release it if you tell me no. And it was Percy who told me, oh, no, you have to release it. You have to. He said, you know how many people don't know what happened at Wounded Knee? And boy, was he right. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people I mentioned it to, and they'd never heard of it. So he wanted me to make it because he said, you need to go out and tell this story. Let people know what happened here. So wow, what an honor. And so, yeah.
So that sort of segues into your Emmy nomination, right? For the Wounded Knee documentary.
This is funny. Okay. This is funny how things work. It actually doesn't, because the Emmy for Wounded Knee happened before. It happened before. I worked on that in 2007. That's right. 6 years before I actually ended up on the back of a horse on the Bigfoot ride. So yeah, I had grown up knowing about it. You can't be Lakota and not know about Wounded Knee. You just can't. And so I grew up hearing about it and knowing what happened and all that. And so to be asked to play my flutes and to be part of that production was a huge honor. I mean, at that point, arguably the greatest honor I'd ever had was to be able to play my music to that story. And so, yeah. And on the ride, and, during that experience, I never uttered a single word about that to anybody. Not a word. That's not why I was there.
Yeah.
I wanted to be there and I just wanted to disappear. Just wanted to be on a horse and be with everybody.
Well, I think that production plays into this idea of you gradually bringing yourself forward into healing. It was the first step of you sort of dipping your toe into, participating and you're just amazing. You just keep going. And I love the, of Mist and Stone. I know you have another album out now.
Yeah.
Eclipse, is that it?
Yeah. It's called Eclipse.
And definitely love to get into hearing that. Um, so I have one question I want to ask you. What inspires you? What keeps you going? Like when, things are kind of hectic out there right now and a little chaotic and,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things blowing around and,
Yeah.
what gets you to smile and inspires you?
Ah, what when you remember me saying when I was a little boy and I would sit and watch the birds, it's the birds.
Yeah.
I see the goodness in the world. I see it. It's all around me. It's always been around me. When I was little, I saw I could hear music in the rustling of the leaves. I could hear compositions in the swaying of the grasses. You know, I I could I always have been drawn to the beauty of the world, and I'm less interested in the sort of meanness of the world. There's plenty of that, and I, I don't want to focus on that. I never have wanted to focus on that, and so from the time I was a little boy right up to the present, I'm always sort of noticing the beauty in the world and seeing, like the other night, I'm a night owl. I'm up until, 2 or 3 in the morning almost every night. And I have been since I was a very small boy. I've always been up late, always. And I've always been drawn to the night. And the other night I was walking around up here where I live. And as you know, I have a lot of woods and forest and all that around here. So the wind was just whirling the other night, and it was so warm and balmy, and the stars were out, and I could not stay in the house. I just walked out the front door, and I did not come in for hours. I just lost myself in it. It was just the most beautiful thing in the world to just feel the wind just playing with my hair and blowing on my face, and just the scent of it and just the sound of it. And so I'm always drawn to those things. It doesn't mean that I don't know that there is darkness and that's part of it. See, that's why I love the dark. To me, there's beauty in the dark. When the sort of, if you want to call it, the veil of the lighted world gets peeled back, when the sun goes away, then you see into the universe. You see the stars. You see as far as you can possibly fathom, and you realize that's there all the time. You just don't see it because there's too much sun, and so the night to me is not this idea of it, it's dark and light or good and evil or bad and good. It's not like that. To me, it's a shade of everything, and there's good in all of it, and there's beauty in the world, even in times when it's everything seems toppled upside down. There's more good. It's an amazing thing. I'll never forget a guy who was speaking one time after it was a terrible shooting or something that had happened, and a bunch of people had been killed. It was terrible. And they were talking, there was like a eulogy afterward. And I'll never forget this guy. He said, no matter what, he said, evil always tries to sort of win or overtake. But the problem is, he said, is that when there's evil, there's always more love. Like more love comes in, more care comes in, more compassion. There's, for the people who've been hurt and the people who have experienced the horrors of evil. All of a sudden, all of this love comes pouring out, and it overwhelms the evil every time. It always overwhelms it. So there's always more of it. So it can never win. It's like trying to dig a hole in where the ocean's washing up. Trying to dig a hole in the sand, the ocean just comes up and just fills it up. It's like love. just fills it up.
Love.
You can do the whole if you want, but it's just going to get filled up again
Yeah.
with love and life. And so when things go bad, I've seen plenty of things going bad in my life. And I have always, in those moments, in somehow, some way, shape, or form, found a way to find the nugget of joy, find the nugget of happiness, find the way to the light, find the way to the dark, where the stars are revealed. Find my way to those places that are filled with beauty and hope and love and goodness. There's good in the world. There's even good in places we don't expect there to be good.
Yeah.
And and so when we live that way, when we live expecting to see the good in people and see the good in the world, then we find it. It's out there. Yeah, there's bad in the world, for sure. There's bad in the world. There's some crazy stuff in the world. That's for sure. But again, it's a hole in the sand on the shore. It's a hole in the sand.
Thank you. I see you as one of those go-tos for people. I see your music as a go-to to find the love and the healing.
Thank you.
You're the ocean that keeps covering up the holes for many people.
Wow.
It's very important. And I have a little quote here from 2015 that I found that you wrote.
Oh.
And this is about your cedar flute. The native flute itself is an instrument that can and does heal. It is a humble vessel, empty inside with its ego out of the way, that allows spirit to flow freely through it. It was born of love and a broken and then mended heart. That power to mend became another of its uses, which continues to this day.
Yeah.
The essence of all native music is its earth's connection, whether it's a native flute, a hand drum, a powwow drum. The songs native people bring forth from these instruments are about connection, honor, and spirit. And I would say also bringing the healing and the love, which I feel your music does. And I'm just so inspired by your story and the wisdom that you've shared with us today. And I love your flutes. I love the way you play them. I've had the pleasure of being in your company when you've played them. And thank you for showing us your beautiful, the
branch flute.
The branch, yes.
Yes.
Thank you for showing us the branch flute. I'm deeply grateful for that.
Yeah.
And we look forward to offering your albums and things. There'll be links down below for people to find your books and your music.
Yeah.
John Two Hawks, it's an absolute honor and pleasure to know you.
The honor's mine.
Thank you for being on Wisdom Keepers of Earth. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. Thank you.